several things to ponder in the midst of what we believe is the potential power of this process. Most discipleship processes everywhere tend to point to an ideal person, not to a unique person. Let me say it again. Most discipleship processes point to an ideal person, not a unique person. After a while, people get exhausted with trying to be like Jesus. Very few people have even been introduced to the idea of what it would be like to trade out that bracelet and put on a brand new bracelet. And the brand new bracelet would read, "What would Jesus do if he were me?" When that happens, that's a significant transition right there. So here's the way I've just kind of put together a little mathematical formula for those of you that would think like that. So what we're really trying to do in this process is say we all have a common calling. Right? We all have a common calling. This common calling tends to be very generic in nature. Okay? We all have a common calling to become more like Jesus, to honor and glorify God with our life, to make disciples. Right? All those things are true. It's not that they are inaccurate, they are inadequate. So we have a common calling, but we need to add to that our special calling. Our special calling. Special calling tends to be very specific. We're joining that with the fact that I'm a dad. I've led a certain kind of church. I've apostolically worked with certain kinds of leaders. I've had these phenomenal, epic adventures in my life. I've had these great successes. I've had these horrific failures in my life. So all these things need to get joined together. Those two things together equal our unique calling. Our unique calling. And that's really what we're trying to help us get to in all of this. That moves us from looking for an ideal person to a unique person. So back a number of years ago, I don't know how many of you remember or are familiar with the Reveal study. So I was one of the main guys on the team for all of that. And in it, we really identified, and we ended up, we had more than 500,000 people in our database that really went through the whole Reveal deal. And in it, we really identified 4 different people that I would just commonly refer to as 4 different members of the spiritual community. So whenever I looked at the church that I was pastoring, I thought we really only have 4 people here. Okay? And that really, really helped. And in our language, it was, first of all, we have people that are exploring. Then some of the people that are exploring cross the line of faith. They're now beginning as Christ followers. And then we want to help them further move toward the point where they're consistently growing. And then to me, even though the Reveal study used a different word, I would use the word, then we want to move them from growing to multiplying. And the reason for that is you tend to think about, okay, I'm a baby here, I'm a child here, I'm an adolescent here, I'm an adult here that can reproduce. Now, the reason why I bring up the Reveal study is that most people up until then really thought the biggest gap that existed was between people that are exploring, people that are beginning. And one of the things the Reveal study pointed to was actually the biggest gap was between people that were growing and multiplying. This is where most people were stuck. It wasn't over here. It's actually easier to get people to move from here to here than it is to get them to move from here to here.
Oh my.
This is the crux of the church right now. And a part of what I would humbly submit to you, a part of why I believe people are stuck right there is because we've been pointing them to an ideal person instead of a unique person. And like you guys, I've dealt with thousands of people over the years in every kind of context imaginable, both nationally and internationally, and I'm telling you that people are right here after a while, they just get exhausted by the whole thing. And they've heard it all, they've done it all, they've been there, and no one is offering them anything new. But what they don't realize, they don't need something new out there. This is what we keep doing as church leaders, looking for something new out there. Actually, the very thing you and I have been looking for all along, we've possessed all along. And you and I are trying to help people, as we're doing it with ourselves, mine out all of the gold that's right there, that's called the kingdom of God in me, in you, but is showing up in my flesh. Where the Word becomes flesh and moves into my neighborhood. I'll give you one other, just might be a bit of a provoking thought for you, but in Common Calling, it seems to me we're called to become conformed to His image. We all sign off on that. But in Special Calling, it seems to me that Jesus then conforms Himself to me. That's what incarnation is. So I'm definitely called to be conformed to His image. But somehow, He conforms this seriously. This Creator Father who's for us, alongside us, within us, He seems to conform Himself to this body, this personality, this fiery red and wonderful sunshine, yellow, okay? This type 3 and 8 on the Enneagram. He seems to conform Himself to that, but those together equals my unique calling. Does that make sense? So it's something to kind of, maybe sit with a little bit. Because to me, this is part of the bigger picture of really where we're trying to help move and facilitate all of this that the church seems to be stuck in a major way. Questions or thoughts about that? Yep.
Will said yesterday that I had spent 5 years writing a book on calling, but I did. This is why. This idea of common calling and specific calling. I had the blessing of having Oz Guinness, who wrote the book The Call, coach me in writing this book. And the very first manuscript of the book, Oz sat down with me across the table and looked at me, and in his British accent said, "Please just tell me you're not writing another self-centered, narcissistic book to help people feel better about themselves."
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, "What are you talking about?"
Yep.
And he very articulately took the common and specific calling and said, here's the deal. The church historians, common calling is the primary calling. Specific calling is the secondary calling. And if we let the two get mixed up, if we don't see our specific calling through the lens of its purpose is to fulfill the primary calling.
Yeah.
So that idea that we are conformed in the image of Christ.
Yeah.
But the mystery of that He conforms to us in our uniqueness, but we can't miss the for what purpose. It still links back to the reaching, to carry the fullness of Jesus into all of society so that other people can be conformed to His image.
Right.
We're given a special gifting for one purpose. It's to carry the fullness of Jesus and bring that common calling into all corners of society. So Oz just beat the crap out of me, actually, if I can say that. Don't just put out another self-help book. It's just going to focus on special calling without it having a really strong root into common calling as what brings it to life.
Bingo, bingo. So that's a great affirmation of this. Any other thoughts or questions on that?
For my teacher friends who are Logos saturated, what scripture would you point to for God conforming to us?
John chapter 1. Incarnation is all about the Word becoming flesh. And Paul seems to drive this home over and over again. In fact, the biblical language I would use for unique calling, this is Christ in me. So I'm supposed to be conformed to His image. He seems to somehow conform Himself to me. And that equals the Christ in me. So, yeah, because I don't want to get off track here, but up until then, everyone was talking about a historical figure, Jesus, and Paul never met the man. Who he met was the eternal Christ, and he recognized that something had not just been incarnated in Jesus, but had already become incarnated in him, that was then pouring out of him, it just, to your point, wasn't just for him, it was for the sake of the world as well. Yeah. So I keep coming back to the incarnation motif of Matthew 1. And again, I think we all love the language of Peterson there, where the word becomes flesh and moved in the neighborhood. And, yeah.
I think, that, again, when I was researching on because this question was important, the two things I really came to, we talked about APES this morning.
Yeah.
And in Ephesians 4, we have to believe and understand Jesus embodied all 5 of the giftings
Yes.
that he gave to
Yep.
the church. And so in Ephesians 4, when it says Jesus himself gave some to be, some to be, some to be, it's Jesus who's the author of those
Yeah.
gifts to the church. And then forgive me for not remembering the reference, but I think it's in Corinthians, there's a reference to the Holy Spirit giving out our gifts, the Holy
Yep.
Spirit being present with God, giving out the gifts.
Yeah.
So that idea that it's a beautiful picture of God and the Holy Spirit molding and shaping and giving us our unique gifts
Yeah.
that we have. So
Yeah.
it's there,
Yeah.
scriptural basis. So.
Good, real good, okay? Yeah. All right, so what we're going to do here the remainder of the afternoon is we want to help you move your generic and move your specific down to your unique, okay? So that's where we're going here in the next 45 minutes or so, right? Page 89, the context circle. So, no surprise, let's pull out the great one now. The context circle.
If your hand was-
So with the context circle, this is solving this problem. Where in the world can I have my greatest impact? I've got a dilemma. I'm not sure what that looks like or where that's supposed to be. So the context circle is intended to help us answer that question and resolve that problem. What is the environment that I seem to really thrive in? And again, I'll just go back to my 2 F words. You know, what's the environment that I tend to be most fulfilled in and most fruitful in? Or let's use our 2 V words. What's the environment where I seem to have the most vitality and I'm able to demonstrate the most value? All right, so that's what we want there. So in order to get to that, I want you to turn over to page 90, motives and modes. So page 90, what I want you to do is, this comes from Tom Patterson. So what I want you to do is look through these 4 types of motives and go, which of these motivate me the most, is a strong motive within me. So contribution, by the way, is about, what's the contribution that you want to make to the world? So that's what contribution is all about. I want to make this kind of deposit and installment in the world. So just think Mother Teresa. You know, her motive was making a contribution to her neighborhood and then ultimately to the world. Presentation and image, that's really motivated, that's when you're motivated to help other people see the way that they should see. That's a lot of what's behind presentation, as well as aesthetic and design can be behind that. Leadership primary, if you prefer to be, if you're most motivated by being in first chair, for leadership secondary, you know, you tend to be more motivated to be in that second chair, third chair, somewhere in there, right? So just circle one of those 4. All right, mode.
Hey, David,
Yep.
actually, on that, it's often good to do a primary and a secondary on these 2 things. So, because it's oftentimes a secondary that differentiates. So, one pastor friend is image oriented in that he wants people to see the world the way that he sees the world. It's his main deal, but it's also expressed through primary leadership. So it's
Good.
image, primary leadership is the way that he expresses it.
Yeah. Okay, good. All right, mode, I want you to circle one of these 4 things as obvious. People like, forget about things. I'm mechanically dysfunctional. So don't put things in my hand or within my reach. Is that correct, Jay?
Yes.
All right, so there's things, there's people, there's ideas primary. Ideas primary means that you like coming up with a very, very original idea. Ideas secondary, you tend to use other people's ideas initially, but you create something brand new from it, or a new and improved version. So circle one of those,
You can do two there too.
and do two there
Primary, secondary.
as well.
Can you repeat the difference between ideas primary and ideas secondary?
So ideas primary, you're coming up with a brand new original idea. Ideas secondary is you're taking someone else's idea and you're trying to further improve it, or else you're trying to create something brand new because of what that activated in you.
How is that different than ideas primary?
Okay, so
Yeah.
ideas primary is actually the theoretical, you are coming up with the concept yourself. Ideas secondary, oftentimes you're reading or you're taking in several different ideas and you're synthesizing that into something new. So the secondary is more creating it from somebody else's primary ideas.
Does that help? All right, real quick, move to your contact circle, write in both your primary and secondary motives and modes right there, okay? Okay, let's move to page 91. 91 and 92. Again, we borrowed this from Tom Patterson. It's called the Thinking Wavelength Assessment. And just the way that you process information and how you show up in context, what you like to be, one of your primary contributions. So this helps us think like this. So go down there in the middle of the page, 91. Question number 1, with each one of these, this is rated on a scale of 1 to 10. And I want you to write down, you see the scale right there. So with number 1, what is your relationship to risk in general? So on a scale of 1 to 10, if you tend to be paralyzed by risk, then you're gonna take a 1 on that. If you're absolutely energized by it, then you're gonna pick a 10 or somewhere in between. What's your relationship to risk in general? So write a number down there for a moment. Number 2, what's your relationship to change? If you tend to be on the lower end of that scale, you don't embrace change. You really don't like it at all. On the other side, you just, every day you want to rearrange the room and rearrange the furniture. You love to create change, or maybe you're somewhere in the middle of that. So write down whatever that number might be. And again, it can be a 3 or a 6, it doesn't have to be a 1 or a 5 or a 10. Third question, how do you process logically? So if you're on the lower end of the scale, you really want someone to walk you step by step, and you want other people doing the same thing. You go to A, you go to B, you got to go to C, all right? So if you're on the higher end of the logical scale, then what that means is you have no problem leaping tall buildings in a single bound, making quantum leaps. You don't feel like it's got to be all figured out right now, logically, sequentially, perfectly laid out in the Word. So scale yourself right there. Number 4, how many variables, concepts, or ideas can you juggle in your thinking at the same time before it just tips you over into the funny farm? What does that look like? So on the low end of the scale, you can juggle just a couple of different things at one time, a couple of different elements or variables. On the high end of the scale, you can be processing 8 or 10 different things, and it just does not tip you over whatsoever, or somewhere in between.
Hey Dave, I like the fishbowl image for this, it helps me a lot.
Okay?
You put a fishbowl around your head, some people prefer to only have 1 or 2 fish swimming around that fishbowl of variables. Some people really like to have, 10, 15 fishes swimming around. It's not multitasking, it's how many variables do you enjoy having in your mind at a given time.
Good. Real good.
1 is 1, 10, 20 variables is 10.
How many fish in the bowl? All right. Turn to the next page. Question number 5. What's your relationship to ambiguity? So 1, you think that could not possibly be God's will for there to be any level of ambiguity. On the other end of the scale is, hey, you're okay with it. Everything doesn't need to be nailed down, concrete, before things can really move forward. Question number 6, what's your relationship to opportunity? Do you tend to see opportunity everywhere, or do you tend to see all the obstacles that are right there? Oh, wait a minute, we just, this thing is fraught with problems. We cannot even move forward in this discussion until we identify all of them. Or, you know what, we'll get it figured out as we go along. We can't miss this grand opportunity that's staring us in the face. Okay? All right, now what I want you to do is add up all 6 of those numbers and divide by 6, and then write your score down right there.
I think that would be really nice to do that.
I need the engineer to do my math.
Then once you take your number down on that thinking wavelength scale, and you can see where you are in terms of, the 5 operative words around this to describe the thinking wavelength are grinders, minders, builders or keepers, finders, and conceivers, all right? So grinders are people that tend to be really detail-minded in everything that they're engaged in. They plow through work, lots of it, but just one step at a time. So a minder is someone who knows how to skillfully kind of mind the store and solve the problems. So a keeper, a builder, is someone that has a blend of both the operational side and the strategic side, or even thinking in terms of insights. They have a good blend of both the order and the progress. So they're regularly balancing both of those things together. Finders are people that tend to be very entrepreneurial. They love change, love seizing opportunities. And then conceivers are theorists who love the big picture and love the big ideas. Okay? So just real quick, just go around the table and say, here's where I plotted myself. Just around your circle there. Okay, page 93. Let's keep motoring.
That's not accurate.
Page 93. Out of this list of workplace motivators, we want you to circle what you feel like are the 5 things that motivate you most when you're on call, when you're on the job, when you're showing up. Which of these 5 best describe what places fuel within your tank? 5 of them. No surprise then, I want you to take those 5, put them in context, circle, as well as go back to your thinking wavelength and place that in there.
The number?
Yeah, I would actually write out the name, yeah, the descriptor.
On this?
Yes. Yep. page 94. What's your preference of work style? Do you like making decisions, or do you lean more towards you like to advise on decisions? Why don't you just circle one of those two?
So I added the third one to that.
Great.
Is this one more
What's your third?
elaborate?
Sounds like you just-
Collaboration.
Sounded like you decided to add a third one.
Okay. All right,
So
you
Mike
can
can
add
have that.
collaboration if you want. Pace, do you love a variable pace, or do you want a really predictable pace? You want it to be the same thing on Thursday as it is on Tuesday?
Where was the,
Just circle one of those two.
94? Where was the
I want it predictable so I can vary it.
Okay. Schedule, you like a flexible schedule or structured schedule? Circle one of those two.
Oh, I see.
Oh, man. Yes.
Yeah.
All right, when it comes to receiving information, data, facts, stuff you need to know, the rest of your team needs to know, you tend to gather that more as a reader or by listening. Circle one of those two. When you report information, do you like to write it out, or do you like to sit there and talk it out? Which is it for you? Do you like 5-page emails, or would you rather go and sit down in an office with someone and talk to them for 5 minutes about it? Okay, circle one of those two. Then I want you to place your work style here in your contact circle.
So I also
I don't
added.
have any time to read it.
Okay, of course you did. Good. Okay. Say it again.
It's limited in the learning style, it's only a language or auditory learning style, so I added visual graphic.
Okay, visual graphic. All right,
You just keep innovating.
that's good.
There are more than 2 learning styles.
Not according to Norton House. So funny.
This is a little bit over, it is a simplified binary thing on this that's really informed by Drucker. Drucker would teach on how even great accomplishment, great leaders would often not have the self-awareness of whether they like to get things. It's a little bit, that was kind of historic over the decades of him as a consultant. He would make these observations, so they lose a little bit of the, some of the brain science, more recent.
Yes.
So, but you can color in some more categories for us, Justin.
Absolutely. All right, let's go to page 95, organizational preferences. This is a fun one. So, if you were to start today somewhere, what would be your preference in terms of the organization you want to be engaged with? When it comes to size, would it be a solo technician, where there's just 1 or 2 of you that are involved? Small platoon, 4 to 12 people? Small family, extended family, 8, 10 to 25 people? Medium-sized organization, up to 200? Or really large organization, north of 200? Circle one of those, organizational size.
In the church, you're talking about staff, not members.
That's correct, the team you'd be dealing with.
It's such an important self-awareness piece here, because literally I've seen people who are great in entrepreneurial in organizations all of a sudden get into a big organization. They're doing the same kind of thing, but they're not nearly as effective as they are in entrepreneur, that kind of, smaller base. Seen the exact opposite as well. Back when we started our ministry, one of my buddy's wives was fantastic in a large organization, and then she came with us at Wayfair, and we were so small, she didn't know she didn't know what to do. She was an all-star at the 100-person organization, but all of a sudden she came to Wayfair, and she didn't have what she needed to do what she did, and so she just struggled like really, really bad on that.
Good. Okay, organizational stage. Speaking of entrepreneurial, circle one of these. Do you like for the organization itself to be at the startup phase, entrepreneurial stage? You want it to be growing? Do you want it to be more stable, more predictable, or do you like turnaround contexts and situations? Circle one of those four.
Another thought on this, there's a great great HBR kind of contribution, where a great performer in one organization, goes to another one and just completely misses. And these are lenses on the different ways size affects the culture of an organization. Life stage in an organization affects its culture. So, the cultural matchup between someone's gifting is a huge factor of their success. So, I wish I could remember the name of that book where it's, I don't know if anyone remembers that, you take an all-star in one place, put them in somewhere else, they can totally, it's like, what happened to that person? And these are the facets of assessing culture and cultural fit that sometimes we do not attend to at all. It's the same role, we just think I'm gonna be as successful in that place as I was in this place. But how different is an organization that's been around 150 years versus one that's been around 15 months?
It happens in church planning all the time. People that are great in leading certain kinds of churches, all of a sudden think, I'll just go plant another church, and all of a sudden they get out there and plant the church. And where did that?
It's also another big idea that helps reveal this is one of the best-selling business books of all time is a book called The E-Myth. And it represents the entrepreneurial myth, and it answers the question, why do most small businesses fail? And the answer is that most small businesses fail because they're started by frustrated technicians. They're not started by entrepreneurial leaders. So what happens is that technicians in a very large organization get very frustrated about that. So they swing all the way over to start up something by themselves. And just all of a sudden, rather than looking at that huge pendulum swing, maybe there's different size organizations, or that technician doesn't have to be completely isolated, where they can't lead, going from 0 to 1, organizationally speaking, but they can go into a different size and have a different level of freedom or scope in what they do.
Just thinking about church planning, there's a church planning, so a lot of founders who find a founder organization don't end up getting kicked out by their board. Eventually, that happens all the time in business, and there's a book called Leading at the Speed of Growth that talks about all the different turns that you have to make as a leader to move from founder to, leading a very complex organization. It's extremely practical, but for church planting, they're exact same issues, like where's your money, what's your staff doing?
Exactly.
What are you doing
Yep.
daily?
Yeah, bingo.
It's an extremely practical book.
Yeah, good. Great suggestions. All right, let's
Another,
move.
as a little bit, I know we gotta move on. Even in the church, there's a very helpful Larry Osborne-ism of thinking of complexity in church as you're a track star, then you're a golf team, then you're a basketball team, then you're a football team. It's just another way of looking at church stages through those levels of complexity. You might be a better fit at a golf team or a basketball team than you are a football team or whatever.
Yeah, good, good. All right, organizational mode. Do you tend to like working virtually by yourself, alone, or do you tend to like working virtually in a hive or a hub with other people where you're able to bounce things off, still collaborate, even though they might be in a different space? So I want you to think about that. A third thing is, would you prefer to be at a brick and mortar place, a physical office? But being there, you want to be sequestered and be independent within that brick and mortar, versus would you like to be in a large open room collaborating with other people in a brick and mortar physical address? Circle one of those.
It's a brick and mortar, but within workplace, it's independent workplace.
Yeah,
Like I have an office with a door,
exactly.
but I can feel free to wander as well.
Exactly, right, right.
Just curious.
I got this friend.
Okay.
His name is Schmug.
All right, organizational mix. Do you prefer just to be a part of one organization, two, multiple, or do you like freelancing? Or do you go, I don't even understand why someone would be asking this question? Which of those? Organizational scope, which is circle one of these. The organization that, again, if you were to begin today, would you want it to be local or regional or national or focused more globally? Now, we know Jesus has called us to reach the whole world, but that doesn't necessarily mean you or me. Okay? So don't let that moralistic lens come in. Organizational ministry. Circle one of these. Is it more around church, parachurch, nonprofit, or for-profit? And I would add a fifth category, home. There are some people, they just want to be a mom or a dad at home. And that is their ministry. That's their organizational ministry. Okay? So which one of those 5 contacts do you feel like you best show up in with the best of who you are? And again, what we're trying to intentionally do here is to acknowledge the fact that everything else that the rest of our people are doing in our churches is ministry. It goes back to APES and the things that Jess and I were talking about together this morning. You're about to.
Yeah, I think, guys, recently we really spent time on this. When Will and I are thinking about our own personal calling, we're dealing with difficulties that we face. And so one of the difficulties I think we both, like, I know I faced, and Will faced it as well, was I feel called to a certain kind of ministry, but I don't know how to work that out in the church. For me, for a long time, the things that you could do in a church were youth ministry, pastor, or music director, or whatever. I remember getting out of college thinking, I have this thing inside of me, but it doesn't fit into any of those deals. And so really being able to distinguish that I was called to ministry for the broader C church more than the local C church, that was like huge. And for that to be okay, because I always kind of felt guilty about that. And so being able to distinguish between those two things, be able to distinguish, hey, do I feel like a regional scope leader or a national scope leader or global or local? I mean, people I've coached through this, there's some people I coach that they really want the part of their impact to be with a local group of people. And they may have some, carryover influence, but really their heart beats for this locality. Others, are moving into regional kind of influence. So just try to figure out where is your best influence. Is it at a local level, at a regional level, at a national level, at a global level? Again, these are all the things that when Will and I are talking about our journey through this calling, no one ever gave us space to ask those questions. And so you feel like you're just kind of like a blind man navigating out here and hoping that there's space for it. And so we really want to take some time in this to just make space, to just work through all those different kinds of questions, because they were vital, at least for us, in understanding where our fit was.
And again, just to underline that, we believe there's equal value in each one of those categories. So again, in Christian world, we all know what the aspirational thing is, but we don't understand what's behind that. So, okay? Yep.
How do you guys navigate like the celebrity mentality? Like even for pastors who see people like on stages, the desire to like success equals a big ministry, and then helping somebody navigate like being okay with what maybe God has called them to be a part of.
Yeah, that's where we're trying to help you, even during the unique process, discern the difference between your compulsive identity versus what is your true identity. Who God's really uniquely wired you up to be, where you're joining together your common, your special into your unique. So, celebrity world these days, everyone wants to be on the Willow stage, everyone wants to be on the Gateway stage, and you go, what's that all about? Is that a calling from God, or is that something else that's been driving you, where you would feel more approval, you feel like you would be achieving more? So we're back to our life choice right there. Yep.
Life trips is a major part of that.
Yeah. That's why I said a moment ago in the underline, we believe there's equal value across the board with all 4 of these. Yeah.
And I just tell you too, I mean, just in light of the whole for-profit piece, I can't tell you how many people I think have made the mistake because they have a sense of burden or call from God that means they have to be in Christian ministry. And really, one of the things that we've all been, David and Will and I have been passionate about is raising up what we're calling the pastorhood of all the believers. Priesthood kind of feels like we're all Catholic kind of deal, but the pastorhood of all believers. And if you take someone like Cent Marshall, who's the vice president at AT&T, she'll tell you she thinks AT&T is her church. And that doesn't mean she's not, plugged in a local church, but she's saying, I'm owning this as my church, and this is my parish. So even at Grace, what we're trying to do with our people, we're trying to release our people, we're saying, everyone is a pastor with a parish waiting to be declared. Where's your parish? Is it in your neighborhood? Is it in your work? Where is it? We want them to, sense that pastorhood is for everyone, so to speak, that this calling piece is for everybody. And some of us are just working that out inside of for-profit companies. I had lunch with a guy last week who runs a service, it's back-end service for restaurants. Red Robin's a big client of his, but he's gotten into this whole thing. He went to Unique and different things like that. And he started his own company on the back end of some experiences with other bigger companies. And he's hiring women out of a town in Alabama that's kind of a dilapidated town. He's hiring women because he wants to invest in the economy of this old town. Women that have some flexibility. He wants to increase and empower women in this area. And then he's sitting there thinking, not only do I want to do that and invest in the dollars, he's sponsoring stuff for the high school there, but he's also saying, I want to get some worship leaders trained and eventually maybe some pastors trained and maybe eventually even be responsible for planning a Grace campus in this small town, all based around his business. And I'm sitting there thinking, that is like what we want to be normal. And here's a guy that just would come in every week and you have no idea that was in his heart. And so to be able to empower that and say, man, I hope you make a lot of money. I hope that your business succeeds. And I'm actually going to work a vision frame with his business moving forward, because as his pastor, I'm sitting there saying, if I help this guy's business succeed, number one, big win for our world. Makes sense?
Yeah, that's why we're so excited about the Unique process. We feel like this helps identify this and then reinforce it and then really mobilize the whole thing. One of the coaching clients I have, he's the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. He runs one of the largest produce companies on the planet. And he sees his entire company as his parish, as his church. And I just coach him like that. So he literally sees himself as a pastor. So every week, he's crawling down into the lives of all of his executive team, as well as every single week he makes field trips out into the picking fields because he's concerned about the working conditions, the health care, the education of all the people that are working. How's it going with their families? The only reason why he does this, that is not profitable when at your first blink. But your second glance is one of the smartest things you can do. But he's doing that because he believes he's representing the kingdom of God in his context here on earth just like that. So again, this is a part of the significant message we want to broadcast through this particular process, and then actually create these practices for people where they can live it out, and then where it gets reinforced within the spiritual community. Okay? So, in light of all that, we've given a lot of explanations there. I want you to go back and repopulate your work style and the organizational preferences for each thing that you circle. You can put that on there.
They have a clarifying question on organizational size. Is that the organizational size I'm most comfortable being a part of, or how many people I'm comfortable leading? Or is there a difference? Because I don't mind being part of a big organization as long as I'm not responsible for all those people.
Yeah. I think it'd be fine for you to make a distinction between the two when you're writing that down. Yeah, yeah. Instead of making it either or.
The
Would you
emphasis
concur
is
with that,
on-
Will?
The emphasis is on the culture that size contributes to.
Okay.
So an enterprise-level organization feels different than an organization that's 5,000 people in it feels inherently different.
What
So it's
culture
a-
feels best for you?
Yes.
Okay, that's.
Yeah.
And it's not determined by the number of people you're influencing. So you can be part of a Navy SEAL kind of deal that has a major influence.
Right.
But you like working in that Navy SEAL kind of deal.
Okay, circle populated. We got one more to go. And then Will's going to walk us through the one tool to rule, and it's going to be be able to do that in 30 minutes somehow. So life stage identification. Page 96 and 97, this comes from Robert Clinton. Again, Making of a Leader, just such a classic leadership book. So he really went through and has identified 4 specific phases of the ministry or vocation that you would go through. So I want you to go through and read his descriptors for all 4 of those phases, and I want you to circle not a phase, but one of the specific subparts of that phase. The one that really identifies your current life stage. Not your aspirational one, but where it currently is.
What's an influence mix profile? A number of these reference the influence mix profile. What is that?
Robert Clinton.
Right.
Yes.
Never read Robert Clinton. What's the for dummies version of influence mix profile?
Oh, yeah, it's that little technicalism there. That's, yeah, he had, that would be kind of his, a recipe. The other tool we use with him is that, ultimate contribution thing. So he has a pretty huge lexicon of different kinds of
Yeah.
things that he was trying to create a virtual toolbox of understanding yourself. So your influence mix profile is really how it's a typology of how you influence people. And so we're not dipping into that as much as we're giving attribution to him as a thinker of life stages. And so we're really kind of broadening across the top, saying, what broad level stage are you in your personal development? So we're almost pulling this out just to look at phase 1, 2, 3, 4, and the ABC categories here. So yeah, we're kind of using definitions about, or technical terms without defining them more.
That's how we
Well, it uses it in like a few of them. My role transition.
Yeah, I can't unpack the typology underneath that off the top of my head on there, but he's got a lot of stuff. Yeah, I don't remember what it is.
All right, so write down whatever you circled here on your contact circle, on your life stage. Okay, in the next 45 minutes, we want to use this, your sweet spot, to help you identify 2 descriptive words. Then we're going to move it to 6, and we're going to move it to 12 words. But before we do that, I want you to take all 3 of your circles and lay them out in front of you. Okay? Take all 3 of your circles, pull them all out. And I want you to stare at them for a moment and realize that no one in history, no one ever before in history has had all these things true about them except for you. And just to take a moment and say, God, thanks for who you've made me to be. Using all of this to concoct this strange, wonderful, beautiful, awesome, miraculous Ephesians 2:10 within me. Yea, God, yea, God, yea, God. Amen. All right, we'll